You're listening to the RE Social Podcast with your hosts, Andrew and Vince from AnVi Invest. For more information, go to anviinvest.com.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of RE Social Podcast. Today we have our guest, Joel Miller from Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Vince. Appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be lively.
So, Joel, so for people who don't know who you are or haven't read your book, what's the name of your book?
It's Build Real Estate Wealth, and the subtitle is Enjoy the Journey of Rental Property Investment.
That's awesome, man. So can you give like a 90-second intro of what do you talk about in that book and who you are?
Yeah. Well, it's called The Big Book. We got that right on the front page. It's called The Big Book in about real estate investing because it's like 460 pages. But it's becoming the new go-to resource for changing your life with rental property. It's Ron LeGrand reviewed the book, and he said he wishes he would have had my book when he was getting started. So it's really a comprehensive book that starts with mindset and goes through forming your entity, and then it gets into acquiring property and how to manage property and how to acquire and manage tenants, how to literally set up your office, and talks about tax ramifications of investing in real estate, and goes on to get into the discussion between the difference between riches and wealth, and also wraps up with a lot of great advice, best practices that you can put to use, no matter what type of business you're in. But of course, it is mainly slanted toward the real estate angle. It's primarily about rental real estate, both commercial and commercial and residential. But I have a chapter in there about house flipping because I have been flipping houses since 1991. I've done well over 100 houses, but it was mostly about rentals. So I've got a chapter in there about the the about house flipping. But at the end of that chapter, there's a QR code that you can focus on, and it'll take you to bonus material for the how-to of house flipping. But it's written for the established investor that wants to gain some game-changing information and supercharge the portfolio they already have. But it's also written for people who are just starting out or who are about to start out, or even people that maybe think that although they might want to, but they wouldn't be able to become a real estate investor. And my point, one of the major points of the thing is that real estate doesn't have to be an either-or situation. You can add real estate to something that you don't want to give up, like a career that you're passionate about, or some sort of hobby, or a job you love, whatever. I wrote it that way because I actually did that. I don't know if have you had any full-time professional mobile disc jockeys, or at least a retired one, on your show in the past?
A mobile disc jockey?
Yeah, probably
like
not.
For
right?
radio, or?
No, I'm like the guy that does the DJing at the weddings and high school dances and big corporate events and all that stuff. I pioneered that in this part of the country back in the 70s, and I did that for 35 years, 5,051 appearances. And I finally retired from that in 2011. But I bought my first rental property in 1978, only about a year and a half after my first mobile DJ appearance. And I had been on the radio for a while before that, and went into the mobile work as a result of being on the radio. So the mobile DJ work and my real estate portfolio or activities, actually coexisted for all those years. And I'm now in my 48th year of landlording, and so we've eventually gave up the mobile DJ stuff and continued to grow my real estate portfolio after retiring in 2011. But then in 2018, got involved with hard money lending, and that gives me a lot of satisfaction, being able to be part of the equation for many of the local investors that are around here when they're flipping houses or acquiring a property that they want to keep and they need to stabilize before they refinance. And so that's what I mainly do at this point. But I was, as you know, I was telling you, before we started recording, I wrote the book because I have a young son. He just turned 19 a little while ago, but he bought his first rental property last year, about a week after he graduated from high school. And so the book it contains the information and the calls to action that I would give my own son. There's no BS here. I'm not writing I didn't write the book knowing that I'm probably never going to meet most of the people that buy it, and I'm not going to have to be accountable to them. And I wrote it like the person that was reading it was going to be able to nudge me and say, hey, would you really do this? And yeah, I've done it. I would do it. And this is my best advice to you. And so it's a very sincere, presentation in the book. And but no one should think for a moment that a seasoned investor would not get something out of it. It's it has some really expansive stuff in there that I'm sure no matter how experienced you are, you could get something out of it. And as a matter of fact, it contains like over 150 checklists, bullet pointed checklists for everything from tenant screening questions to due diligence questions, questions to ask references that have been given you on somebody's rental application. It even has a list of the tools you'd want to have if you're really just starting out, So lots of stuff in there, and it's kind of becoming the new go-to resource, like I said, of getting started or growing a rental property business.
Hey, Joel, I got a very important question, probably the most important question of this podcast.
Okay.
What are the top 3 requested songs from your DJing years?
Oh man! The top 3 requested songs. So you really want to know this? Okay.
Yeah.
Old Time Rock and Roll.
Okay.
Celebration, by Kool and the Gang, and the Electric Slide.
Electric Slide, huh? Yeah, that's a party.
With a close, right behind that, the Macarena in later years. That was not always around,
You can't really see, but this room has like guitars everywhere. We're both musicians. That's why.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's
that way. Yeah. And speaking of that, I always found that the best songs, the best art always came from like just doing it for yourself, doing it for just like you, in like not trying to sell to the masses.
Right.
And it sounds to me like that's kind of how your book came about. You're like, I just needed, this is all I do. This is all I know. And this is for me. This is for my son. This is from the heart.
Oh, so Andrew, you totally nailed it. You get it. It came about starting in COVID when we had a little extra time on our hands. I started making notes of what I would want to write in the book, because it was right about that time that it was apparent that my son wanted to follow this path, and what would he be like, 15 at the time or something like that. It was becoming apparent. So I spent a year making notes, and then a couple of years writing the book, and then another year or so in production, and it finally came out last fall. And yeah, you get it. It's when I'm writing to this person that's right down the hall from me, and is going to is saying that they want to do what I do.
It's pretty impressive how much you packed into that one book. You said mindset all the way to like screener questions for tenants to flipping.
Oh yeah.
That's like,
well, what the reviewers are saying is that this is not the kind of book that you buy and read and you say, oh, that was great, and you put it on your shelf. This is a book you buy you read, and you park it on your desk because you're going to refer to it. Like you're going to maybe bookmark it. Oh, I'm getting a call on, for about, an advertisement I have here. Where's that page that has the questions to ask the people are calling?
Well, let's dig in and talk about how you acquire this knowledge and why people should trust you to, hey,
Mm-hmm.
oh, he wrote this book, but why should I buy it? What's his background? So we'd love to get to know you, from when you were just a kiddo to how'd you even get into real estate from the DJ thing and that same, you said, year, which is also interesting because I started my own music school right after our first piece of real estate that we purchased, a triplex. So it's a very similar journey. I want to know, where did it start?
My pleasure. That is a great question. And I get what you're saying. And I know you're going to totally understand what I'm going to say right now. When I was in junior high, two really significant things happened. Number one, an investor built 4 4-unit apartment buildings right along my paper route in my subdivision where I lived. Of course, I got all the tenants as customers on my paper route. That was pretty cool. But I have a distinct memory in about 8th grade of being in my bedroom and doing the math on what this whole rental thing was all about. Because we lived in just a middle-class subdivision that was all single-family homes. We lived with our parents, and there were just these lots at the edge of the subdivision that nobody had bought for a long time. And so somebody puts these 4-unit places up. And so these people are going to live there, and they're not going to own that like my parents own our house. They're going to pay somebody to live there. And the person that is owning them is going to make a profit on that because they pay more money than it costs to pay for these properties. This is very rudimentary understanding, but I kind of said, I want to do that. And I kind of put that in my back pocket. This is 8th grade. And I said, I'll do that later on, when I can, when I get established. The other thing that happened was an older kid in the neighborhood built a pirate radio station in his basement with the flagpole in the backyard as the antenna, and I got to hang out there. And that is when I made a decision I wanted to be a disc jockey. Now, at the time, there was no such thing as a mobile disc jockey. It was all just, you want to be a disc jockey, you got to be on the radio. So I actually did radio production in high school. I'll tell you the story that you're musicians, you probably appreciate this. I started this nonprofit that was called the Spring Foundation. It stood for Students Promoting the Return of Integrity to the Now Generation. Back then, the Now Generation was a media nickname for kids my age. We want everything now. And its purpose was the production of radio public service announcements. So what I would do was interview all the bands that came to town. And then I would go to the radio studios. I somehow weaseled my way into the production studios at all the local radio stations, wherever I could get in. And I would take their comments and edit them into these 30-second PSAs mixed with that artist's actual music. And the radio stations loved it because, FCC requirements make it so that the radio stations have to play a certain amount of PSAs. I'm sure you're aware of that. But they were always stuck with things that were provided by the government, like join the armed services or get out to vote or, all this really dry stuff with marching band music in the background. And so they just loved these things because they fit right into the format of the songs that they were already playing on the radio. So I interviewed Sha Na Na a couple of times, the Beach Boys, Poco, Rare Earth, Todd Rundgren, all these people that came to town. So when I went away to college, I made sure that I went someplace that had a really good radio station on the campus. And in fact, I went to Grove City College, which is halfway between here and Pittsburgh. And they had an AM and an FM, and the AM station was actually the oldest radio station in the world. It's 6 months older than the station in Pittsburgh, KDKA, which is generally recognized as the oldest commercial radio station. But this is a non-common, was a college station. And I majored in accounting. I did that because, with accounting, you can, you apply that in whatever business that you are working in. So I worked at the commercial radio station in town at Grove City. And about halfway through college, I got a call from the big 50,000 watt FM top 40 station in our town to come and work for them as their weekend guy. And they said, it was like a summer job, but they said, you can stay if you want, or go back to school, Grove City. Well, I transferred, I stayed, went through in 4 years and got my degree in accounting. But right before I graduated from college, the part-time gig went full-time. And so now suddenly I was able to take those calls from the kids that were calling the radio station, asking the DJs to come out and do sock hops, as they called them, in the gym at the high schools and so on. And that was the beginning of the whole mobile DJ thing. So all at once, I graduated from college. I'm full-time at the radio station. I started an accounting practice. I started doing some mobile DJ work, and I stayed in radio just one more year until I found out I could make more money in one night than I was making all week at the radio station. And that, took off. I thought it would last a few years, but 35 years later, 5,051 appearances later, I, had basically pioneered the mobile DJ business in this area. And I sold my accounting practice way early on because I was, buying more rental property and
So how did that happen?
Doing the mobile work.
You had the mobile DJ thing, and then you bought your first piece of real estate a year later?
Yeah, I did my first mobile DJ appearance like April of 76 and graduated the next month. And my job was full-time at the radio station. And in January of 78, I bought my first rental property. Andrew, I still have that rental property, and I was just there yesterday.
Wow.
It's a real cash cow.
Are they in Pennsylvania where you're at?
Yeah, all of my properties are within the county that I live in.
Gotcha.
Although when I was flipping, I did get outside of our county with other properties, further away.
Same state?
Yeah, in Pennsylvania. We are very close. We are a little sliver of Pennsylvania that divides New York and Ohio, but I just never happened to acquire any properties in New York or Ohio. There's enough here, right in our county or the immediate counties around here to do it.
Okay, so I know Vince is definitely curious about this, so I'll go ahead and jump ahead and ask. Let's get into the numbers of let's talk about what's your annual revenue for your DJ business. What are you averaging? And then what was that first property? What was the sale price on your first?
Okay, well, like I say, I haven't been a DJ since 2011. But, I made a really good living doing that. And one year, 1984, I did 254 appearances that year, including 101 appearanrances in 101 days over the summertime. I had a few days off because most of my Saturdays had 2 appearances, but that was the big year there. But that's part of my point with the book is, okay, here is how you add rental property to what you don't want to give up, like another career, and add to your income. That's what income property is for. You acquire something that produces income, whether you get out of bed or not, as the phrase goes. Not that there's not responsibilities and work involved, but it's not like an hourly job where if you're not there, you don't get paid. Well, the tenants still have to pay you even if you are sick. And so it's rental property is for adding to your income and bolstering your retirement, because a lot of times what people are involved in that they love doesn't provide its own retirement. The DJ business did not provide a retirement for me other than the money I specifically put aside in Roth IRAs, which then later on became some of the money that I used for hard money lending. I lend money both inside my IRA and the local money that has been acquired, and is in our control locally. But the rental property business is something that you can do to add on, but also many people, as you well know, their goal is to get rid of their job. And you know what job is? It stands for just over broke. They want to get rid of their job as soon as possible, and the book does give the tools to do that. You can. The point with it is that you can take it to whatever level you want.
And so your first property, though, what was the sale price, and how did you decide that's the property?
The first property I bought cost $25,000, and I put 20% down out of my savings, and financed the rest with a local savings and loan, which is still in existence. So it's a very strong one. It did not get caught up in that whole savings and loan debacle, back in the 70s and so on. And right now that property is worth, well over $100,000. And I realize it's hard for you guys to equate. Maybe you're in California, I'm in Pennsylvania, the property values are vastly different for the same type of property. I would guess maybe in California that property might be worth several $100,000 right now.
Wait, you bought it for $30,000? It's only worth $100,000 after 30 years?
25. It's not in a great neighborhood. It's one of those properties that has it's in an area where you would not expect to get a lot of real steady appreciation. It provides a lot of good cash flow and some appreciation, but I have other properties that have gone up much greater commensurately in value, but on this particular one, it was cheap. And I can also tell you that was actually the first and only rental property that I ever bought using a realtor. It was listed. Every other property that I have purchased since then, and your listeners should know this because I want to point out how possible this is. Every other one of them was an off-market deal.
Where'd you find those?
From some other investor,
Wholesaler or a buddy, or you had like a big
Never bought a wholesale property. I bought one flip from a wholesaler many years ago, but always with off-market deals. And I will say though, of the houses that I bought to flip, there was, like I say, 100 and some of them. Many of those were bought at auctions, not always just from an existing seller that I contacted. And several, I'd say maybe 20, 25% of them were brought to me by my realtor. And however, I always used a realtor to sell my properties unless I was approached, and this happened frequently, like while we're working on the property, somebody might get interested in it and say, okay, when you're done with this, let me know. I'd like to look at it. And so I ended up selling, I would say, again, maybe 20, 25% of the properties were sold by myself, without a realtor, because I found a buyer easily, before I, wanted to list it. So, but I've always said the best deals are the off-market deals from other investors, which brings up another point. And I make this point in the book. I strongly promote people becoming active in whatever local landlord association there is. Sometimes they're called RIAs, Real Estate Investment Associations, because that's where you're going to get to know the other investors and network for everything from getting recommendations on contractors to use, or how to do different things if you don't already know, to finding out when they are selling their properties. I mean, properties are continually just changing hands from one investor to another within the professional organization. They never even get listed for other people to see them on the market. And so not only would you look for the networking that you would get from a local association like that, but probably they offer some sort of education. Like in our case, it's the Apartment Association of Northwestern Pennsylvania. And we have our own Landlord 101 class, as we call it. It was written by one of the founding members of the organization, who's like fifth generation as one of the largest developers in the country, let alone in our area here. You could go to one of our meetings, a dinner meeting, and find yourself sitting across the table from that guy, as well as sitting with me or sitting with somebody who is getting ready to buy their first property, and you can give them advice. And so I strongly recommend getting involved.
Association.
I'm sorry, what?
Landlord Association is what people should be looking into.
Yeah, whatever. And they have different forms around the country. Many of them are actually privately owned by somebody who's maybe a realtor or an active investor, and they literally have created a for-profit club, so to speak, where you have to pay to belong, and somebody's trying to make a profit. That's fine. A lot of times what they're doing is bringing in speakers that have courses or mentoring or boot camps or something like that for sale, and whoever owns the organization is getting a cut of whatever the sales are. But nonetheless, the people that come to the meetings that are members of the organization are getting information and perhaps buying one of those courses. In our case, we do the exact opposite. We never have anybody come in and do that sort of a thing. And ours is a not-for-profit organization that is run by the members. And on the other hand, though, we have a monthly dinner meeting where we bring in a speaker that talks about something to do, with our business. Last week, one of our board members, who happens to be a mortgage broker, this is the third year he's done it. He put the meeting together where he had a whole panel of really high up bankers there. We call it a banker summit, and it gets the top level banker people right in the same room with the investors that are borrowing money from those lending institutions. And these bankers are able to say, what the appetite is for their lending institution for various types of rental property, and what the qualifications are of the applicant or the investor that they want to see, and how they want that application presented. And that's just an example of a good meeting, for an organization like I'm talking about.
I'm actually going to write that down. I'm part of the Chamber of Commerce, which has been interesting because I've been able to connect with people that are in a whole different realm that I didn't even expect, like on yachts here in the harbor. But Landlord Association, that is definitely something to look into.
There's an organization called National RIA, and it's essentially the organization that the local groups would belong to on a national basis. And so they have affiliated chapters all over the country. It's NREIA, National RIA, Real Estate Investors Association. A lot of times people just refer to these local groups as RIAs.
Yeah,
Real Estate Investors Association.
Into a couple. Yeah. Cool, man. So let's dig into your timeline. I'm trying to get some timeline going for you so people can follow along, who people are listening, so they can get some value out of it. So you got your first property, and it was in a reasonable neighborhood, not the best, and you bought it for 30. It's gone up to 100. But what was the
25,
next?
Bought it for 25. Sorry.
25. Nice.
Yeah.
And then it's quadruple. So what else did you do after that? So you got some cash flow. Like, what were the numbers when you bought it, and what is it now?
Well, I increased the cash flow a lot right at the beginning, because when I bought it, it was 2 units, the first floor and a second floor. But the first floor had 4 bedrooms. And so what we did was we divided up the first floor into a 2-bedroom, 1 bath by adding a kitchen and a bath, and using one of the bedrooms for the using one of the bedrooms to create the bathroom, and using the dining room to create the kitchen to be an eat-in kitchen. And then we ended up with a 1-bedroom efficiency, with keeping the existing bathroom and the existing kitchen area. So, if you've got 3 units producing income, you're going to make more money from the same property than if you only have 2. And it had 3 garages behind it that were slightly dilapidated, that were not rented out. And And so I fixed those up, and I can tell you that there hasn't been 1 month that at least a part of the month, mostly every month all year long, that all 3 of those garages have not been rented since 1978. So that's a lot of, extra income. And of course, I think when I first bought the place, I would imagine, I can't even remember, but I'm sure the rents were probably like in the $200 range, back then. And now they're, 3 times or 3 times plus that, and, an average rent in that kind of neighborhood in this part of the country is, in the, $700 range, right around there, $700-800. I realize that's way less than in California, but, we're talking real estate's location. It's all, markets are all local. It's translates, lower property prices translate into overall lower costs of living that, I experienced living in Erie compared to, what you guys have in Orange County, California.
So what did you do with the second property then after that?
The next property was from another investor, and
where were you meeting them, through the RIAs?
yeah, I've been a member of this organization since it was started in like 78, I believe, and I've been a member since about 81. And so actually this second property was in 1979. And although this was from another investor, I did not know him through the organization. I knew him through mutual friends. Actually, you guys are musicians. I'll point this out. One of the other things I did back in the 70s, I managed a couple of successful bands in this area here. And this guy happened to be the brother of one of the musicians that I got to know, an older brother, that had been investing in rentals, and he was ready to sell that one. You just got to be at the right place at the right time. Let it out. Let it be known that you buy property. That would be great advice to the people listening to this. If don't hide it. You want to let people know that you buy property so that when your friend's aunt dies and the estate needs to sell a property, they think of you, so
right.
You always want to promote that. And
so has a big part of your success been from the networking aspect?
Absolutely. Especially with the hard money lending, because hard money lending is really done on, relationship basis. That's the advantage of it, is the speed that the loan can get closed. I'm lending to investors who are going to buy and or rehab single family homes that they're going to sell to a third party in less than a year, likely, and that third party is going to live there, and we're going to get paid off whenever they have the closing to sell to that other party. We also lend to investors that are buying and or rehabbing a keeper rental property that they're going to stabilize so that they can get permanent financing on it from a bank down the road, whereas they can't get financing on it in the condition that it's in right now, or with the value that it's in right now, in which case we get paid off whenever they have the closing to refi the property. But that would be something that anybody getting started in buying rental property should get familiar with, because hard money lending essentially allows you to borrow money not from a bank, but from a person you have a relationship with. Hard money is a type of private lending. Private lending is bigger than just hard money lending, because some private lenders lend on properties as an actual amortized mortgage, where they're going to get payments each month that include principal and interest, and it goes on for a long period of time. Hard money loans are typically for a year, and they're interest only payments. So how do you get to know these people? By networking with the other investors and finding out that they're borrowing money from these people. It's typically the older people, or the more experienced folks that are in the investment community, because that's why they're able to do the hard money lending, is because they've been around a while and accumulated some cash. And maybe they have sold properties because they don't want to have rental properties anymore. They're going to sell their properties, get cash, and lend it out to the other investors.
And they have the knowledge of having been there.
Right. Yeah. So how can I do that? Well, It's because I get to know them in the networking setting, and I can see, who they're hanging out with as far as investors go, who they're taking their cues from, what the business model is that they're trying to develop, and whether they are getting involved and taking more and more education. I pretty much insist that they take the landlord 101 class, preferably one of the ones that I'm teaching, so I can get to know them even better. And this way, they can call me up. We talk about a deal on the phone. And if it passes muster over the phone, the next step is to walk the property inside and out of every unit if it's a multi-unit place. And, I just ask questions like, hey, what's your plan for this? Did you notice that? How about this thing over here? And I can tell you guys, sometimes by the end of that walkthrough, those investors are absolutely sure they don't want to buy that property. But I can only do that because I've done what they're asking to borrow for. It's not like I'm just somebody with some money who never invested in real estate, who never flipped a house, who never was a landlord. I've done all these, just like what they're asking me to lend them money on. And so I can give them good advice. And if it, typically, if the project looks good, we just do the deal on a handshake right on the spot. I just tell them, yeah, I can lend you the money that you're asking for. And I come back to my office and prep an email and send it to them for approval.
I'm kind of curious. What are maybe some
then when if they reply that they agree, we just send it off to the attorneys and we can close a couple of weeks later. Now, I will say though that although the underwriting essentially is on a handshake, the actual documentation is locked down. I mean, it's the same type of documents you'd expect to sign with any kind of lender in terms of a note and mortgage and assignment of rents and all that stuff.
Yeah, I had a question. What are some of the maybe top 2 or 3 deal breakers that you see when you're walking a property, especially that the young investor doesn't see?
Right. A lot of times they don't notice things about foundations. Literally the structural issues with a property that doesn't catch their eye at first. A crack in the foundation that is a little more serious than just a little settling. I always insist that they do well and septic tests. You don't want to be buying property that you haven't tested the water well or the septic system, because if you don't have water, you really don't have a property. A habitable property, shall I say? You don't have that, and a septic system can be very costly to remedy if there's a problem with that. But I always caution people against but houses. It's a term that I came up with. I always say, don't buy a but house. A but house is a house that you could throw all kinds of money at it from a cosmetic standpoint and make it really pretty. But when you're done, there's still something about that house or that property that you can't change, that is the sort of thing that when, Mr. and Mrs. homeowner, potential homeowner, come to look at this to buy it, or even if it's a tenant, that people that are coming to look at the place as a place to rent. Like, for example, the woman says, "This is really pretty, but there's the railroad track is 50 feet away. There's a junkyard next door." Or it could be something like an obsolete floor plan, or a house that is just built on a terrible lot. I turned down one a couple weeks ago just kind of for this reason. It's just the only way to get in the house is a huge staircase up from the street. I mean, I'm talking 25, 30 stairs. That's a but house. You could make it look real pretty, but somebody's going to say, yeah, but I couldn't live here. So that's what I would caution you. And those are typically in the areas of floor plans and things outside that you cannot change. that, like I mentioned, the neighbor with the junkyard and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we've been learning that with our own portfolio, doing a lot of renovations on our fourth now in just a couple months. But there's still some issues that are ongoing and they're out of our control. It's the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you just cannot change and influence. So we've
Right.
definitely noted that and have really made now our direction is very, very clear for the next deal.
Have you thought about investing in real estate and taking advantage of all of those benefits without any of the work? That is something that AnVi Invest not only provides, but has been providing since its inception. With friends and family, we have built an empire and a system of a wealth-generating tool that is giving us and our friends and family that leverage in their life to create true wealth. Go to AnViInvest.com for more to see if you qualify. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, you don't want to buy a property as an investment hoping something out of your control is going to change in order for you to make a lot of money on the property, because then you're a speculator, not an investor. There's a big difference between being a speculator and an investor. You know, a speculator thinks something's going to happen and they put out their money in hopes of that thing happening in order for them to make the money. And if it doesn't happen, maybe they don't make anything. You know, but an investor is somebody that is acquiring something that they can have a lot of control over in terms of, like, let's talk real estate terms, in terms of, raising the rent or doing improvements to increase its value, and also, raise the rent as a result of all the improvements. And rental real estate is such a great investment just for that reason, as far as being able to control so much about it compared to anything that you buy on a quote unquote exchange, whether it's precious metals or stock or bonds or pork bellies. Those things that you can't control anything about that. It's not like you can buy a share of stock in a big company and do anything on your own to raise the value of that stock. Whereas you could buy a rental property and immediately force up its appreciation, force up its value by things that you do to it.
Precisely why we park most of our income in real estate.
Yeah, we have an acronym. It says real estate is ideal, IDEAL. The I is investment, is income. D is depreciation. E is equity, gaining equity. A is appreciation, growth in value, and L is leverage.
And now let's have some fun. What does that mean, leverage, just for the listeners, especially in this conversation based on stocks versus real estate?
Yeah, well, leverage means, in our context here, refers to money leverage, and that is borrowing. You're using OPM, other people's money, to. It's like when somebody, borrows money from me for a hard money loan, and let's say I am lending for the 100% of the purchase price and 100% of the rehab money. Let me just stop for a second. Sometimes we lend to an investor who is buying and or rehabbing, say, a single family home. Sometimes they are borrowing the money just to buy it. They're going to put their own money in for the renovation. Sometimes they already own the property and they are borrowing the money to do the renovation. Sometimes they own a property and they're borrowing against the equity in that property in order to do the renovation or perhaps purchase a different property altogether. So oftentimes, though, I'm lending to do both. I'm giving them 100% of the money to buy the property and 100% of the money for the renovation. Of course, if you are getting renovation funds from me or any hard money lender, probably the renovation money is going to be escrowed, like with our attorney, and given out to you in 3, 4, 5 draws as you work your way through the project, kind of like a construction loan, so that we know for sure that the money is actually being spent to improve the value of the property before we release the next draw, But in that case, think of that. I have lent 100% of the money for this whole project for that investor. Maybe they sell that for $30,000-$40,000 profit. It's not uncommon. That is an infinite return because they don't have any money of their own invested. That is leverage. And like with a rental property, what typically happens is they will lend all the money for the buy and the renovation. And when they get it appraised for their bank loan, who is only going to loan them 75 or 80%, they have forced up the value on that property enough that the appraisal will still allow them to get a loan large enough to completely pay us off. That investor is now in that property also for no money, but they own this property and it's producing income. That again is infinite return on investment. That's leverage.
Vance, you want to jump in?
No, I'm just listening. It's pretty good. I wanted to ask you more like, you've been investing for more than 40 years now. What do you see in the market, when you started in the 70s and 80s, when interest rates are a little bit higher? We got Paul Walker just like destroying inflation and stuff. I'm sure you remember that. And the interest rates were like in the teens. And now, we have higher rates compared to where we were, but, the market's different. But the income to purchase ratio has taken a hit. Before you could buy a home for like, let's say 100 grand, you were making probably 30 grand a year. But now it's like you're making 50 grand, but the home is like 500 grand. So it's like it's gone up much higher. So what do you see in terms of when you were starting to now, and then we can talk about what we can do?
Yeah. Well, guys, I don't know if you remember who was president in 1978, but that was Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy was wrestling with a lot of things in the economy, like the energy shortage and energy crisis, I should say, and inflation. And when I bought my first property, prime was in 1980 at least had gotten to 22% prime. And I was an investor for about 5 years and renting myself in an apartment complex. For the first 5 years, I was an investor until I bought my own first single family home that I moved into in 1983. And I was pleased to get an interest rate of 12.5% for that mortgage on my personal residence in 1983. So, like since then, I've been through about 5 economic cycles or so, right around in there. I will tell you, though, that interest rates started to come down in the 80s, and the banks were doing something that I'm sure newer investors haven't heard of, and that this is something that would happen in a climate where the interest rates are dropping. They didn't want to lose all these mortgages that they had originally made at 12.5% or whatever. And so they would offer that you could pay them a fee, like maybe, $1,500, a couple $1,000, and they would simply adjust the interest rate down on the existing mortgage and let you keep the mortgage and lower the payments and so on, so that you didn't refinance out with some other lending institution. So keep that in mind if we ever are in a situation where you've got a high interest rate mortgage and now it's getting time to you could easily refi at a much lower rate. You might want to approach your own bank to see if they would simply lower the interest rate on an existing loan, and you pay a little fee, but it's less than you paying all the closing costs of going through getting a whole other mortgage with a different bank. So the other thing I would add to that is that
free gold.
Perhaps a lot of investors listening got started in the past 5, 6, 7 years or so when prime was 3.25, and it remained at 3.25 for I don't know how much, 3, 4, or 5 years. I forget exactly. Right, it was close to that. I want you to know that's not normal. If you are complaining about the way things are right now because you got started when prime was 3.25 and mortgage interest rates on investment property were, you could get a loan for 4 or 5%. That's not normal. And what is happening right about now is actually much closer to normal. Interest rates on loans more like 6%, 7% maybe. Prime at what it is right now, it's, I don't know, what, 7 or something like that. That's closer to a normalcy in the economy. 3.25 for prime is almost as crazy as 22 for prime.
Yeah, I agree. We got spoiled for like a year, but then it messed everybody up. Like I remember we were trying to sell some stuff, buying some stuff, and it was just a very different world, different economy, different mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
It was a weird thing to navigate during and after, as everything became artificially skewed because of that year and a half or two when we had these.
Yeah, it was painful in 2008. I got stung a little bit there, just on one deal actually. The house that I just happened to be finishing in 08, I had was a flip. I had obtained a buyer and at a good price. I was going to make a profit, and the buyer was close to getting his financing done. We were moving toward a closing, and then all of a sudden, this debacle happens with the banks and so on. And the bank that the buyer was using canceled his loan. And what happened was I couldn't find another buyer at that price and had to keep lowering the price until I found somebody, almost a year later. That was not a good deal because I was like chasing the market down, till I finally lowered the price enough that it was where it needed to be in those particular market conditions. And
did you consider renting it out and keeping it and just kind of riding
that one? I did not. I ended up selling it, but I have done what you suggested there on several occasions where you get done with the project and you realize that you just can't make enough on it. You can't sell it for what you thought you could, or you just ended up paying too much for it in the beginning, or you ended up putting too much into it, and now it's not going to be a profitable sale. So if I'm capable, because I got to keep my money tied up in the house, I have put a number of those into like a lease option arrangement where we took an option fee for somebody that moved in. And
can you just briefly describe what a lease option is for anyone?
Yeah, a lease option is when you you sell. An option is something that's sold. Like you can buy an option on stock. It gives you the option to buy the stock at a certain price later on, no matter what the price of the stock is on the exchange. Well, with real estate, you would give somebody the option, the right, but not the obligation to buy the property for a set price for a specific length of time. And for that privilege, they would pay you a fee. It could be $10,000, $20,000 that they would pay, and that's a non-refundable fee. That's your money after they pay that. And then they are there as tenants, just like any other type of tenants, except that you might be able to put language in your lease agreement that completely eliminates your responsibility for repairs during the time that they're there, especially minor repairs, for example. And so, they live there as tenants. None of their rent goes toward the purchase price of the house. This is not a rent-to-own situation. They just, they're there as tenants, and they have the right to buy the property within the allotted time. It might be a couple of years or so, right around in there. And you have to sell it to them at the agreed upon price, no matter how much that place is worth by the time they go to exercise their option and buy the property. People do that, buyers do that because they might recognize that at this moment they could not get a mortgage or a good mortgage because of some financial situation that they are working through in their own personal lives. Like perhaps they did have a bankruptcy in the past, but it hasn't been long enough since their bankruptcy for the bank to disregard that. for example, or, maybe they've gone through a divorce and they're getting on their feet and they need to get their credit score up higher. And so they're willing to rent, but they really like your place and they want to own that someday. So it's a, win-win situation for everybody, because they get a place to live that they can buy whenever they are capable of buying, and they don't have to move, into some place that they buy after they rent it. And, you typically get a better tenant than usual because it's somebody that wants to own the place. And if the option time expires, well, and they want to stay there, then you sell them another option. It doesn't roll over. You don't renew the option without getting another option fee, put it that way. So I mentioned rent to own. The difference is that with rent to own, there's typically not a large fee at the beginning. Rent to own is simply a landlord tenant arrangement where some of the rent is set aside as a credit toward the tenant in case they ever might want to buy the property. Then the landlord has said, yeah, I will count like $100 of your rent every month as long as you're here toward your down payment whenever you go to buy this. But there's no obligation on either party to buy. Of course, there isn't with a lease option either. It's still an option, but a rent to own is different from a lease option, is what I wanted to point out.
And what would be the incentive for the owner in a rent to own or rent to own contract?
In a rent to own contract, the advantage would be that you're going to get higher rent. You're not going to charge somebody market rent like you would charge to somebody that you knew was only ever going to be a tenant. You would pack that rent with an extra amount, and that would be the amount that would be credited toward the tenant should they ever want to buy the place. But if the people just move out, they were regular tenants, well, then what has happened for the investor is they've simply collected a higher than market rent for however length of time that those tenants were there, and don't owe those tenants anything once they moved out. They don't have to give that extra money back.
In your 40 years of investing, flipping, now writing a book, what are some of the biggest blunders you've made? What are some of the biggest mistakes where, like, man, I wish if I could just do that over again, I would have done it like that?
Well, I did lose money on several flips. Sometimes it was, just bad decision making, and sometimes it was, like I had explained, with the change in the market suddenly that was out of my control. That hurt everybody simultaneously. But I can think of one commercial property that I invested in. Actually, it was I bought into a partnership. I was like three guys, and the managing partner wanted to get out, and he was a car dealer, and he just had a number of different investments that he would get in and out of outside of his car dealership. I happened to already know the other two guys, and so they asked me to buy in and replace the managing partner, which I did, and of course I got paid for being the managing partner, which came in handy later. But that was in September of one year, and by November of that year, two of the tenants had gone bankrupt. And the significance of that is this is about a 60,000 square foot office building. One of those tenants had 51% of the building and was the corporate offices for a retail operation. The other tenant was a restaurant and banquet room that was used for parties. That actually DJ'd there quite a bit. And they had about 25% of the building. So here I am a few months into this, and 75% of my building is occupied by tenants that are in Chapter 11 bankruptcy trying to renegotiate the leases. And that became a 10-year ordeal of doing just putting out fires, till we got to the end of the 10 years. Well, after 10 years, actually gave 1/3 share in this partnership. I gave it to the other two guys just to get out of it.
Wow.
And
10 years of that.
The lesson learned was that If you are going to buy into particularly a commercial property, doesn't apply so much to residential properties where you've got you might have a big property, but it's divided up among, a whole bunch of tenants. A couple of those tenants go bankrupt in a, little apartment complex. That's not going to kill you. Like, that, that wasn't like what I was experiencing in this commercial property. So like I say, the lesson is that if you're going to buy into a commercial property that has some larger tenants in addition to, a bunch of small ones, I would spend a little more time than I did trying to assess the financial stability of those larger tenants.
Looking at P&Ls.
I was totally surprised whenever, they go bankrupt within a month or two of each other after I've only owned the place for a couple of months.
So you inherited squatters for a decade.
That's insane. Yeah. And we had to renegotiate the lease with the restaurant. They gave up the banquet room space, and we had to. When you're dealing, when a company's in Chapter 11, the bankruptcy court becomes your tenant, and that judge has a lot of power. Like, you will let them out of the part of the lease that covers the banquet room, and it's yours. Do with it what you want. And so we had to ultimately condominiumize the building and literally sell parts of it off and rent parts of it. My one partner moved his medical practice into part of where the banquet room was, just so we could fill that, and then he paid rent. But there's one silver lining, Andrew. I met my wife in that building as a result of being the manager.
How did that happen?
Well, one of our tenants was one of the branch offices of one of the larger realtors in the area, and she worked as a receptionist originally in that area, in that realtor space, and ultimately became the personal assistant to the broker that ran that office. Well, I'm the managing partner, so I kept an extra set of keys in that office in case I were to show up at the building without my, it's a huge key ring, it's quite a large building. And, if I needed a key to do something, I would go in that office and get my extra set of keys. And she was the keeper of the keys. And so we met, and, that was one of the first things that I did after we got married. I gave my interest in that building to my other partners the year we got married to.
You're like, I'm creating a win
out of our lives, So
how much money did you lose in that one, Joe?
Well, remember I said that the being paid for being the managing partner kind of came in handy later?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I sat down later and figured it out, and I determined that once I added up all the money that I had gotten as the managing partner, it about worked out to the amount of money that I had originally put in, But on the other hand, I had given up my time, to do that for 10 years,
10 years, yeah. But you learned some experience, got a wife out of it, and lost no money.
Did you put any of that in the book, by the way?
That whole story is partially covered in the book, but
It's a bonus chapter just when we get you on the podcast. Thank you.
So and that kind of points to something else I would say about real estate is that somebody has said that the only time you're going to end up getting burned or make a mistake in rental real estate is usually because you run out of time. Because it seems like even if you make a mistake, if you have enough time, real estate is very forgiving. There's typically some way, if you are holding on to the real estate, that you can recover from the mistake that you made. You mentioned the lease option thing. Well, if I would have gone ahead and sold the house for what I could get for it at the time that it was ready to be sold, and I would take a loss. But instead, I would hold on to the property and rent it out for a number of years and then maybe sell it down the road. And ultimately, looking back, still made a lot of money on the property. It's just in a different way.
On the appreciation.
And yeah, through operating it successfully as a rental that cash flowed greatly, and then being able to sell it years later for a nice profit. But it was a sales price that I wouldn't be able to sell it. Was not able to sell it for when I had first finished the project and put it on the market. And that happened several times actually. So again, what was the difference there?
If I have more than a couple of cocktails, I end up kind of almost yelling at my friends who I've been doing this to for years. Just get something, get in the game. Just start, get a crappy condo 2 hours away.
Yeah.
Start, which is what we did. We did something 3 hours away in the desert. But time in the market is everything. We were just looking at deals right here in our local neighborhood, and we're like, we can't afford those. We're priced out of our own neighborhood now. Like time is on your side once you're in the game.
Right. And another thing I would point out is that you don't have to know everything to get started. General Colin Powell, as I'm sure you recognize as the former leader of the most powerful army in the world ever, is quoted as saying that in the military, we would make our decisions whenever we knew about 70% of what there was to know about the situation. And we're talking war. We're talking people's lives there, So you can start in real estate without knowing 100% of the stuff. I mean, you got to be careful about getting caught up in thinking that, if I just go to one more seminar, if I just have one more boot camp, or if I just do this one more educational thing, then I'm gonna be rich.
They started their LLC.
Yeah, right. They got nothing in it, but they started the LLC.
Yes, they're worth nothing, but they have an LLC.
I started out with nothing. I still have most of it.
Yeah.
Hey, did you guys hear about the landlord that was seeing a clinical psychologist, a psychiatrist, and a licensed counselor about a personality disorder? Yeah, he had an apartment complex. Well, you know why the realtor was seeing a counselor? He couldn't get closure.
All day, keep these coming.
He's got all the dad jokes.
I'm sitting
Okay, here's another. You know that a landlord is just a realtor without a sense of humor.
Hey man, we have sense of humor.
That's good, man.
Hey Joel, so how many properties you got now, man? Like you got like billions of dollars? So what's going on?
No. We've sold off a bunch of stuff because what I've done is as I've moved more into the hard money lending over the past years, and also with my son coming up, we've kind of sold off a lot of properties that I'm down to just the ones that my son is likely to take over. He's in business college right now. I mean, he goes to the branch campus of Penn State University here, and the people that rate the departments in colleges rate business schools on a per campus basis, and the one that is here in Erie, it's called Barron College of Penn State, or Barron campus rather of Penn State, excuse me, is in the top 5% in the country. And so he is studying in the business department, and he's a freshman. And the plan is for when he gets out of college that he will be sufficiently prepared to take over.
So you've sold off everything, you said?
Everything but the deals he wants to either sell or give to his son.
The only ones we have left are the ones that he's gonna buy from us. I'm not giving them to him. I mean, they'll be free and clear, So the purpose or the plan would be to take back the financing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So he's paying us each month. That's the monthly check. That's retirement there. And of course I'll give them to him at a good price, but nonetheless, it will be intentionally with carrying back the financing. and he'll have some nice properties, and who knows how many he'll have on his own by then too. But he's starting small, like I did. His properties that he has now are similar to the first couple properties that I bought. You asked about the first properties. Like I say, the first one was listed. Found a realtor to show it to me, and that's how I bought it. Next one was from a friend. The next one was from the mother of one of the musicians in one of the bands I was managing, who had become the executor of her sister's estate. Her sister had no children, and her sister had died, and the mother of my friend was the executor, and so I bought that property out of that estate, and it just went on from there. I think the next one I actually did get at a sheriff's sale auction, and that was a row home in a neighborhood where there were, I don't know, close to 100 row homes. They're like condos, the property line goes up to the wall in between, but there's no there's no condo association, and these were built 100 years. So this is a good story. So I'm renting this place out. It's an end unit on the six unit building, and it's the end unit, and there's a driveway in between my place and the end unit on the next building. And my tenant says to me, "Hey, can you do anything about how that place on the other side of the driveway is in such bad condition? Get the landlord to fix it up." So I look up who the landlord is, and I find out the landlord is a doctor who I know from coming to my DJ appearances. And I talked to him. I said, "Hey, what are your plans for this place? Are you fixing it up?" He says, "Look," he says, "I'm 59. I just had a heart attack and surgery. My doctor has told me that I've got to get rid of all my rental properties or I'm going to die."
That's hilarious.
We're laughing really hard.
And he told him he actually this guy's cardiologist actually made this guy retire from his medical practice. He was a gynecologist, had a big practice here. So he retires from the gynecology practice at 59. And long story short, he sells me his entire portfolio. It was 14 units over 13 properties, 1 2-unit place, 2 single-family homes, and 10 more row homes in the neighborhood where I already owned 1.
This is like the deal. 4th deal, 3rd deal. What is this?
Yeah, this was quite down the road. This is in 2000.
Okay.
So I had some experience then. I had a good crew. I knew we could tackle these rundown places. So the deal was no money down, no payments for 18 months, and then interest only for like 5 years after that.
What was the interest?
The purchase price was 2/3 of the amount that he had gotten for some recent appraisals on the property.
He really needed out.
Yeah.
A motivated seller.
It worked. The guy's in his 80s. He's in his 80s. He's still alive today. I just saw him in a doctor's office about 4 or 5 months ago.
You to thank for that. You took on the stress.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's just an example. It's relationships. It's who you know.
Yeah.
That's somebody asked me on a podcast, "What's your superpower?" I said, "My superpower is relationships," because that's what makes it all work. I'm well known in the area here with these, like teachings and stuff that I do. That I say this. I say, if I had a choice of losing all my money or losing all my relationships, I would lose all my money in a heartbeat, because my relationships will help me get my money back. And if I had all that money and no relationships to enjoy it with, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
Don't make a withdrawal from a good relationship just to make a deposit in your bank account.
I need $5,000.
Again?
Yeah. I just asked him for $5,000, making a withdrawal.
Yeah.
Oh, he's gonna earn it though.
Yeah,
he's gonna earn it.
I have 100% success rate so far. Hey man, I wanted to ask you this. I don't want to keep you for too long. I know. First question is: are you around Philly?
Am I what?
Are you around Philly?
Philadelphia.
Oh, no. Philly is the exact opposite end of the state.
Okay.
They are in the southeastern part of the state, and Erie is in the northwestern part of the state.
Okay, cool. We have our buddy Vivek who got us onto real estate. He's probably listening, but he started in Philly, and then that's where he learned all his game, and he went a little bit outside. But
A lot
my
of row
other,
homes in Philly.
yeah, he actually owns one. He rents it out. I think he makes like $500 or something per month on it. He has a good interest rate on it. Now, my other question was, I've never met anybody, talked to, or even met anyone who's gone through 4 downturns. So, with that in mind, how are you navigating those kind of times? And do you see anything in the market that suggests that? And do you continue to buy in those markets, or you wait it out? How do you do that?
What I believe is that a good deal is a good deal. And it doesn't really matter what's going on in the marketplace as far as whether you should be in or out. No matter what's going on in the market, if you're active looking for deals, you're going to find a deal that makes sense in that market. Now, you got to be careful, not to over leverage yourself. Like for example, if you got an adjustable rate mortgage, let's say 5-6 years ago, when that was real low compared to now, and now it's going to adjust at a higher interest rate and your payment's going to go up significantly, you might be in trouble. So you have to kind of anticipate a little bit. Like, don't go into a deal so completely skinny that if the least little thing changes for the worse, you're going to be in trouble. You don't want to do that. But you just have to keep beating the bushes, so to speak, in terms of finding things that make sense no matter what is going on. Because I can tell you, you don't get 100% of the deals you don't try to put together. So no matter what the economy is or what the market is for real estate, there's some way, some type of deal, and it can change, from time to time. There's some way to put it together. Like, for example, 10, 12 years ago, whatever, after 08, put it that way, when there were a lot of foreclosures, the play was to approach banks for short sales. You hardly ever hear about short sales anymore. But back then, that was the main thing. That's how we were going after stuff. The houses were going into foreclosure, and we would deal with the bank of the party that was about to lose the house. Now, keep in mind, this all happens before foreclosure. Before the sheriff's sale, for example, not after. And you deal with that bank to allow the owner to sell to you for less than what the bank is owed. That was the play, And so now we got ourselves a house at a price that made sense to either flip or rent out. Now you don't hear about short sales.
Yeah, being creative. Yeah, that's awesome.
So at any given time, there's a play.
Yeah.
And now, I can't sit here and say, well, if this is a condition, you do that, or
is that advice the same if we're talking to someone looking to flip, as opposed to somebody looking to simply long-term buy and hold?
The advice being that there's always
the same advice.
A certain the advice. There's no one or two scenarios under which those are the only ones that you're going to be able to profitably buy real estate.
And so, as someone who's been doing this for a long time, in just like a 10 to 20 second bite, what is some of your biggest advice for somebody looking to just start?
Buy my book, Build Real Estate Wealth, Enjoy the Journey of Rental Property Investment. By the way, my website for the book is joelmillerbooks.com. That's JOEL Miller, MILLER, books, plural, joelmillerbooks.com. And you can see all what's in the book, and the table of contents is on there. And there's sample writings from each chapter on there that you can see, what you're buying. and there's lots of buy buttons on there. You click on the buy button, it'll actually take you to the website or the page on Amazon where the book is sold.
And it sounds like it's chock full of gold and content, like from mindset to flipping. It's
the whole thing. I would say if you already own Rich Dad Poor Dad, buy this as a complement to that. You put the two of those things together, and you really do. You're going to have everything. But in a broader sense, to answer your question, I would say that the important thing is to get yourself around other people doing the same thing. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Get around other people that are doing it, have done it, whatever, and get yourself some education. You don't have to know everything, like we were talking about before you get started. Just take some steps, start small, and you'll learn. I didn't buy my biggest property for my first deal, and so that's the advice, is to just don't think you need to know almost everything, even.
And to put things into context specifically, if you had to like put a percentage on, let's say, your knowledge of all things real estate now, what would you put that percentage on today, right now, and right before you closed on your first deal? What would that number be comparatively?
Oh, I would say I probably know.
Don't be humble. Just
25 times more now than I did when I first started.
Got it.
And when I first started, I was reading hardback books by guys like Bill Nickerson and Al Lowry. You probably haven't even heard of those guys, but they were the gurus back then. And then we moved into late night real estate guru half-hour infomercials on cable TV. Selling tape courses that came with a binder that had 6 or 8 cassette tapes in there with a manual to follow along. And I would get those. I had a whole bunch of those, and I would take notes. I still have my 3-ring binder notebook for all the notes that I took out, from listening to those. I mean, that thing's like 3 inches thick, that binder. It's 10 feet from now. For me right now, it's on my shelf.
Joel Miller's next move is the cassettes. He's going to sell that next.
Oh, please, no.
I'm buying.
I'll tell you what, people keep asking me for the audio version of the book. And if I make, some good money on it's available in paperback or ebook right now. The audio book could be down the road, but that, 460 pages is going to take a long time to read, and a lot of effort, a lot of studio time,
I mean, I just hire a guy off of Upwork.com to read it out, do it.
Well, no, I'm the DJ, man. I'm going to read it.
Yeah, dude. Hey, I know. I'm aware. I would do it myself, but I'm just saying, like,
you better have sound effects in there, man. Some ELO or something.
Well, and that's the other thing people point out, is what we like. If the author is reading the book,
it is better.
And you can go off on little side comments and stuff.
Yeah, you're right. It is better.
Yeah, it'll be cool.
Well, we'll be happy to give it a listen, give it a purchase. It sounds like, you sold me in the first 2 minutes. So
I hope we sold some people out there too.
Books.com, and we're going to put all kinds of your info in the liner notes as well, so people have no problem at all finding your resources. And
cool.
Vince, did you have anything
No, I'm good. Yeah, it's a good podcast. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast,
Thanks, Andrew.
Joel. It's been a pleasure to have you and pick your brain. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and maybe we could do it again sometime and pick a couple of topics from the book and actually drill down on some real how-to stuff, like tenant selection, or I'm going to be speaking at the Mr. Landlord Convention in June in Indianapolis, and what Mr. Landlord has me talking about is we're dealing with contractors.
Oh, nice. That's a whole different beast. Yeah. Cool. Love that. And where can people catch you on that? That's June what?
That is the first weekend in June, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, June 2025. I forget the exact dates, but Thursday, Friday, Saturday, first weekend in June in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Nice. Sounds fun. Well, catch Joel Miller. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll be looking forward to reading that book and chatting with you again and now going deeper once we have
Sure.
uncovered your brain a little bit.
Yeah.
So thank you again for your time.
I appreciate you guys having me on, and we'll talk again sometime, hopefully.
Yeah, man, we'll do. Thank you, sir.
I don't know about you, but I definitely like to see 5-star reviews on any service or any product before I purchase. Please take a second to leave us a 5-star review, whether you're listening to it on Apple, iTunes, or Spotify, or whatever platform. Take a second, goes a long way, helps us a lot to grow the channel, and thanks for listening.